from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
J.J. Watt, 2-year, $31 million deal, $23 million guaranteed. You said on Friday that the Broncos would be paying attention to this deal to see where Von Miller's contract or restructure would come in.
What does
this mean?
Yeah, right around the same number. You know, we talked about that hypothetical, the 3 years at 45 mil, 15 per. I don't think it changed. I don't think it moves the needle. I think it's an as expected number, maybe a little bit higher for J.J. Watt than you thought. But you know, I think that it was the nature of having multiple teams involved, and I think that you say to Von, okay, look, J.J.'s still out there producing. Your last 2 years are one that had a down production year and then one where you were injured. All right. So what we'll do is we'll give you the opportunity to get back to that number through incentives. But we're comfortable at 3 years, 15 mil per. And I think that's ballpark what you're going to see here.
Yeah, some of the speculation out there that it's going to be tough to actually renegotiate Von's contract based on these numbers.
Not really.
Because he's going to get about, 17.5, 18 million this year or so?
JJ?
No, Von.
Von, yeah, if they pick up his option, it'll be, 18.5, give or take?
Yeah. So this is a $23 million guaranteed, 15.5 per.
Right.
So I guess if you're Von Miller, you're okay to a certain point accepting that number, but at the same time, you could get more out in the open market. Wouldn't you say?
Maybe. You got to find somebody that believes in you, and believes that you'll get back to that level, and that you're coming off the injury and you're going to be the guy that you were 3 years ago. Because, that's the point that we're at now. And who's going to make that kind of investment? I think the Broncos are going to be the team that will put the most money in front of him, to be honest with you. And they may pick up his option. Had a couple conversations over the weekend. And one of these things, it's kind of risk-free. At this point, if you pick up the option, you're talking about a difference of about $3 million, give or take. You get a chance to kind of see if he's really back from that injury and not commit yourself longer and go and feel out the situation and go from there. And, I think that remains an option, and they've got the ability and the flexibility to be able to pull that off.
I guess if you're George Payton, if you're approaching this year a lot like that anyways, you're approaching this year with an opportunity to feel things out, to get a sense of things, get a lay of the land. Mm-hmm. And if you have that opportunity anyways with Von Miller, rather than rock the boat and say, okay, face of the franchise, Von Miller, my first order as the new acting GM is to come to you and ask for a pay cut, or to come to you and say that I don't want to give you the money that you have in your contract right now, right, because I don't think that you're quite worth that. Yeah, there's certainly an argument there for the Broncos to just kind of roll things forward, let this year play out. They might end up doing that with the quarterback anyways. They might end up doing that with several positions. The one they have to make a long-term decision on really is Justin Simmons. Right. Outside of that, everything else is more or less status quo. If you want to sign Shelby back, great. At the same time, you might decide to go a different direction there because he's going to be priced out of whatever market you deem necessary for him. Mm. So the Broncos really can kind of approach this entire year like that. So should the Broncos tread lightly a little bit on a renegotiation with Von Miller, a restructure? Because as we're reporting here, it looks as though there's quite a market out there for J.J. Watt and or Von Miller. Because the fact is, if there were, say, 8 other offers out there on the table, and even ones that were higher value than what he got from Arizona, then I think we can also tie that to Von Miller and say, well, Von Miller might be able to say, come back to the Broncos and say, well, look, you guys don't want to give me this money. That's fine. I think I could get pretty close to this out there on the open market. So go ahead and release me. How lightly should the Broncos tread here on a restructure conversation?
I don't think they should tread lightly at all. I think that they should know ahead of time if they're willing to pick up his team option. And I think what they should do is approach him and say, look, we really don't want to pick up this option, but we will if we have to. So here's what we can do to guarantee the money that you're going to get so you don't lose anything, keep you for 3 years, make you Bronco for life. This is cap friendly. It helps us out, gives us a little flexibility to make sure we can get everybody that we want back and go from there. I don't think you tread lightly at all. I think you just lay it out there what you're trying to do. Be honest with these guys. You don't have to there is an element of ego, with players and wanting to be respected and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, they're not idiots. Just explain it to them. Hey, look, this is what we got. This is the piece of the pie, and we need these other pieces of the pie to be able to feed these guys over here in order to keep this all together. You want Shelby to go hungry, Vaughn? Really? I mean, you don't have to say it like that, but you get the idea. You can leave the implication hanging in the air. So I don't think they need to tread lightly at all. You don't have to watch what you're saying. You just go in there, you make the offer, and you're like, look, if you want to be a Bronco, this is the number.
Well,
if you don't, then we'll pick up the team option, and you'll be a Bronco, and then you can figure this out next year.
But they're not necessarily up against it. This isn't like the New Orleans Saints. They don't have to go to Von Miller and say, if you don't restructure, we can't keep all of these players. Von Miller can come back and say, dude, I see your cap number. You can afford me just fine. Well,
we've got rookies to pay. We got RFAs. We got Justin Simmons. We got Shelby Harris. I mean, there's other things going on here. Plus, we still need to fill a few holes. We're going to have to get another backup quarterback. Jeff Driscoll wasn't it, so we're going to have to get a backup quarterback, one that can potentially challenge for a starting job. And that's going to cost a little bit of money. So I think that's exactly it. I think you put those things in front of Von and say, look, this is our plan. This is what we want to do. If you want to be a part of that, cool. If not, let us know. We'll thank you kindly and move on about our day.
Do you think it was a good choice for J.J. Watt to go to Arizona?
I probably would have taken Indy's money. I think the Colts were a better fit for him. I think he would have.
Indy over the Browns, huh?
Yeah, the Browns. I mean, that would have been a good fit.
Or the Bills.
That would have been a good fit. All of those would have been good fits. I mean, it's J.J. Watt. They're all good fits. The thing about Indy and the Bills is it's a Tampa 2 team, so he'd be playing a little bit different. All he has to do is get upfield and get after the quarterback. It's not like and with the Browns, it's not like Arizona where he's got to be a gap eater before he does that. He's not. His whole task isn't just get upfield. He's got to it's a little bit different in the role, and I think that because he's had that role in Houston for so long, he's just comfortable in that role.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, we chat with Cody Roark from Locked On Broncos. What's the future of Shelby Harris? Plus, what did he learn from breaking down Malik Reed's film? Join us next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Cody Roark joining us from Locked On Broncos as well as Pro Football Network. Let's talk about your interview with Shelby Harris. He was on your podcast today. So tell me a little bit about what you took away from that, and what do you think are the odds that Shelby Harris is back in the Broncos uniform?
Oh, no, it was a good interview with Shelby, just hearing his perspective. This time of the offseason after the Super Bowl, he gets together guys like Zach Kerr, Derek Wolfe, and, they begin their offseason training. The thing is, Shelby told me in an interview his knee's doing good. We know that he had a knee injury in that final game. Actually, he suffered in the Chargers game, the day that he actually went back to be back home for the birth of his son. But he says the knee is good, and right now he doesn't really know what's going to go on in free agency. I mean, I don't think anybody knows. He says that he has no idea yet. Obviously, as the Broncos are looking to make some of their moves, obviously with the Jarrell Casey move, you can make the argument that maybe they're freeing up space to bring Shelby back. But, I think overall for Shelby, just reflecting on the season, he said the main reason he came back to Denver last year, free agency didn't go how he hoped for. But the one thing is he knew that Vic Fangio's defense puts defensive linemen in a position to be successful, and for him to be able to play along guys like Mike Purcell, Bradley Chubb, and even learning from Jarrell Casey, he said was huge for them, and it was a no-brainer for him. I could see him returning to Denver. Right now it's just I'm not aware of what the Broncos' thinking is right now in the front office. I mean, it looks like they're trying to go younger, right? With the release of A.J. Bouye, with the release of Jarrell Casey, they're trying to go younger. It's freeing up some cap space that doesn't cost the Broncos any dead cap. So maybe they are making a push to build the defense. I think that's the vibe that I've gotten from looking at some of the moves they've made. I think Shelby Harris has proven to be valuable. Obviously, his on-field impact, it doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but when you look at the opportunities he's created for guys like Malik Reed, Jeremiah Tautu, Bradley Chubb, I mean, he makes everybody around him better on that defensive interior. And you get another year with him and Mike Purcell healthy, that's going to be a fun defense to watch.
Yeah, I think that, if it's me, I'm a little hesitant if we're going into the season with Purcell being bookended by Draymond Jones and McDelvin Agim. I want to see more out of Agim, don't get me wrong, but those are some real young guys that we really don't know just yet. And letting Casey and Harris go both would be tough. I think they want to get it done. I think it's interesting and kind of unfortunate a little bit for Shelby that the way that this market has played out. Last year, the market was a little saturated because you had DJ Reader. Buckner was on the move in terms of being traded. You had a decent draft class. There just wasn't a market for Shelby. Now, this year, there's not. There's not all these competing free agents at his position out there to go with. And the draft is not very deep at his position either, but you're in a year where the cap has been reduced so much that people may not want to spend on it. So unfortunately for Shelby, he may find himself, in one of those situations where he's got to take a little less money than probably he thought he would. I think the Broncos would be in it to a point. I think they want to bring him back from what I understand, but I think there's also a number they won't go past, and they are concerned that his market is going to be close to that number.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it perfectly. I mean, I think we all thought last year that Shelby was going to be the first domino to fall in free agency. It ended up being DJ Reader, and then the next day, bam, big-time trade for, DeForest Buckner going to Indy. They were in need of a pass rusher, and obviously they got one there in Buckner, so that really impacted Shelby. But, he said it didn't really go the way that he wanted, but, he felt like he came into the season in the best shape of his career, and certainly so. I mean, despite the fact that he missed 4 games due to being on the COVID reserve list, coming back against Kansas City, that chase down play that he had against Tyreek Hill, that's always going to stand out as something why, I'd say, okay, this is the reason why you want to bring a guy like that back, because he missed a month, had no football activity. Vic Fangio said, hey, look, we're going to put him on a snap count. He didn't need a snap count. He came out and he just busted his tail because he's trying to prove his value. And, he's going to be 30 in 2021. So I imagine, I'm looking at maybe a 2-year deal, maybe a 3-year deal, but I can't see anything longer than that for Shelby, and especially at the money. When we saw J.J. Watt's contract, I don't think he's going to get anywhere near that. But part of me is wondering if it's going to be around the $8.5 million per year.
You did a breakdown last week of Malik Reed. Tell us a little bit about what you saw in some of that. And do you think that Malik Reed's role should be bigger this next year based on what you saw, or is it back to being more of a rotational player?
I think the Broncos can get really creative with how they use Malik Reed. And, one thing that stands out to me, he's just very disciplined against the run. Now, if there's a run, a stretch play going away from him, he literally tracks it down the line of scrimmage at hill line depth, which is perfect because the defense on the other side, the edge rusher, is responsible for keeping that contained to force the running back to have the cutback. Well, they did that several times against the Patriots, against the Jets, and then the running back would cut right back into Malik Reed. I mean, that's how Malik Reed had a lot of tackles for losses last season. He's just super disciplined, super instinctful. And, the thing that stands out to me when I talked to Malik as well, he was just talking about how he wanted to learn a little bit more from Von Miller, from Bradley Chubb. He learned a lot from Coach Staley his first year, but the one thing he did is he added his own wrinkle to it, what he could do to build on that. Rather than just copying what other guys could do, he wanted to build on his arsenal, and we saw that. I was really impressed with him. He's just a fundamental football player. You can't ask for, more than that because he's technical. He's going to do his job. He rarely gets caught slipping. And I think the Broncos, they have value in that. I think they can find ways to be really creative with their defensive sets next year in order to get him, as much on-field reps as possible.
The Mount Rushmore of offseason disappointment. The Broncos, the big 4 moves. Whether or not you get Justin Simmons re-signed, whether or not you get Von Miller re-signed, whether or not you get Shelby Harris re-signed, and whether or not you get some type of quarterback to challenge Drew Lock. Which of those 4 is the first face you're chiseling on the Mount Rushmore of offseason disappointment?
I think the Justin Simmons deal. I mean, we've seen Justin Simmons really evolve in Vic Fangio's system. I mean, the fact that he was one of the top leading tacklers on your team from a safety position, everyone wants to classify him just as a free safety. But hey, he's a guy who plays in the box. He plays dirty on the inside. He comes up against the run. He bats passes down the line of scrimmage, against quarterbacks. And he's the type of guy you want to build your franchise around, on and off the field. I think for me, that would be the first move that would be the most disappointing. Now, the second one, I think, if it didn't happen, I would love to find a way for the Broncos to come up with a new deal for Von Miller, maybe restructure his contract a little bit, maybe add 2 years, have him finish out his career as a Bronco. I just think that there's so much value. And, Ben, you guys were able to watch him up close and personal at training camp, and all reports suggest that he was virtually unstoppable. And I know there's a lot of other things in play here for Von, but that would be the second thing that would be disappointing for me if that didn't happen.
Cody, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, could Alex Smith be a good fit for the Broncos as a veteran backup to Drew Lock? We'll discuss it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
So Alex Smith, let's talk a little bit about that. There was a report this morning that Washington is going to be moving on. And, of course, this is on the heels of Alex Smith's interview.
We already knew they were moving on. This was something we all knew was coming.
Yeah, but it was on the heels of Alex Smith's interview where he basically said that, hey, they didn't really want me there. They didn't want me to come back at all. The comeback player of the year, one of the best stories in the NFL last year, and Washington was like, we could do better.
Well, but that's so nebulous. Like, it wasn't they didn't want him back. It was that the front office didn't want to have to do the caponomics. I know this segment is supposed to be, would Alex Smith be a fit here in Denver? But I really think he's going to wind up in Jacksonville. So, which I've been saying since December. But
listen,
whatever.
Bucket of cold water, Allbright.
I believe it's Wet Blanket Allbright. You can find me at Wet Blanket on Twitter.
Alex
Actually,
Smith.
before anybody actually believes that.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's not my.
Alex Smith makes almost too much sense for what the Broncos are actually looking for this year, because they need a veteran leadership guy in the locker room. They need a guy that can competently play the position, that would push Drew Lock a little bit, but not push him to the point where it would be like if he started for the Broncos, you're probably a 500 team, right? But Drew Lock is really the more upside play, clearly.
Right.
So, but you're not handing the job to him by any means. I don't know. For me, when I saw Alex Smith might become available, and certainly we knew this was going to be the case, I was just blown away by how perfect that fit would be if you're looking for a veteran hedge.
I think Alex Smith, the person, and Alex Smith, the player, would absolutely be a great fit. In a vacuum, all things considered, I think they'd absolutely be a great fit here in Denver. He does know West Coast quarterbacking and terminology, so there's that. But I think Alex Smith, the price point, is not going to be something that the Broncos are going to be looking at.
Well, I mean, what do you think the market is going to be for Alex Smith? And then simultaneously, what do you think the Broncos need the market to be for a veteran hedge?
I think you got about a half dozen teams that are going to be seriously interested, including Chicago, where he's got a relationship with Matt Nagy, Jacksonville, where obviously he was Urban Meyer's quarterback back at Utah back in the day. So I think that there are, and would be a perfect mentor for Trevor Lawrence, I think that there are options out there for Alex Smith, and I think the Broncos don't want to be in a bidding war.
Well, see, with Alex Smith going to Jacksonville to mentor Trevor Lawrence, I mean, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the starter there. At least you could convince Alex Smith coming here that he has a real shot at starting still. And maybe at this point in his career, he still thinks he is a starter. You have to keep that in mind about where he's at in his career. Is he ready to become the Josh McCown of a team where he knows that he's a break glass in case of emergency quarterback? Or does he think, no, I still have something left to prove. I want a chance at starting. You're not going to get that in Jacksonville. You may not get that in Chicago either.
You would get it in Chicago. Jacksonville, because I think Chicago can offer that.
All right, so in your scenario here, Jacksonville moves on from Gardner Minshew. Mm-hmm. They bring in Alex Smith and tell him that he's going to be the bridge quarterback to their number 1 overall pick, Trevor Lawrence.
Bridge quarterback and mentor. You're going to come in here and show him how it's done. Yeah, you're going to take a little lumps because we don't have the full roster talent around it, but you're going to show him how we want it done.
Where does Alex Smith rank, in your opinion, on what we expect to be some of the free agent quarterbacks? Like when we're talking about Andy Dalton, we're not expecting...
Below Dalton.
So below Dalton, okay.
I personally would have him below Gardner Minshew at this point because Alex can't run anymore, and that was a part of what made his game. And so, I mean, if you want somebody to come in and can understand certain offenses and explain that to a young quarterback and mentor them and have spot start ability, he's your guy. But if you're banking on Alex Smith to start multiple football games for you, you're not a good football team. You're not going to be good on offense, and he's not going to pick you up and carry you to the Super Bowl.
And I think that's where a lot of people lean on the reasons why they don't want Alex Smith here.
I don't want him
Denver.
here because the price point and the productivity for the price point. Because at the end of the day, Drew Lock is going to beat Alex Smith out for the job. I know that on the front end. All right? And I want somebody that's an actual challenge. Like Nick Foles might beat him out. I'm not saying Nick Foles is a better quarterback. I'm just saying Nick Foles has experience in the offense. He knows Pat Shurmur. And he's got tools to where he can do. They're bringing everybody down in the box because Alex Smith can't throw the football down the field. He can't run anymore. In his prime, Alex Smith couldn't carry a team to a Super Bowl. What's he going to do 6 years past his prime? And, oh, by the way, coming off a horrific injury that he just got back into the league on.
Do you need the backup hedge quarterback? We've had this conversation before, but I think I want to frame it in the way that we're talking about Alex Smith here. Do you need the backup hedge quarterback to be anything more than a 1 year, maybe 2 year stopgap?
He needs to be a 2 year stopgap. He needs to be the guy who can start football games for you in 1 year if he needs to, and be able to have the low enough ego that he can hand it off in the second year. And that's what you need. You need a guy who's able to do that.
It seems like that's a little bit of a disconnect. I've seen when people were talking about Alex Smith on Twitter earlier today, it was I don't want a backup quarterback that I know doesn't really have a future beyond a year or two. And it's like, well, I don't know if
that's not what you want out of a backup quarterback.
You're not looking at thinking about that anyways.
Right. The developmental you're talking about the difference between a developmental quarterback and a backup quarterback. All right. A backup quarterback is a guy that you need there in case somebody goes down and he can start and win you football games. A developmental quarterback is something totally different. That's why every team out there loves the Brian Hoyers and the Josh McCowns of the world, because they can come in, start you a couple games, and they can win you a couple football games, right? But they're not developmental guys. Developmental guys, like in this draft, if you're taking Jamie Newman on day 3, right? And that would mean you're punting on Rippon, which, I mean, some people are okay with that. I thought Brett Rippon showed a little something. I'd like to see a little something more out of him.
I mean, I'd like to keep him here for training camp and see what happens.
See if because I think you open it up and you have a legit competition with all those guys in training camp. See what happens. I think that's what you do. That's just me.
Well, you're not going to have like a 3 or 4 way competition for the starting job.
3-way. I mean, you pay a little extra for that action in Vegas, but
you're not talking about Brett Rippon competing for the starting job.
I'm saying you put him out there and you give him a couple of days to let him earn it or not. Yeah, sure, why not? What does it hurt? What does it hurt to give Brett Rippon 24 reps?
Who are the quarterbacks, in your opinion, that actually push Drew Lock?
Danny Dalton does. Nick Foles does. Those guys push him a little bit.
Okay. But Alex Smith does not.
Not really, no.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.